Let's welcome our final speaker, our Microsoft MVP from Singapore, Senthamil. His session would be about Microsoft 365 development tools and the best practices around them. So yeah, I think so. Let me just give you a bit more about what he plans to do. You'll get to understand a bit about the Microsoft 365 development basics and then into the tools and the frameworks that Microsoft 365 development uses. So yeah, with this, over to you, Senthamil.
Okay. Thank you, Pradeep. You can hear me now?
Yep, you can.
And you can see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for giving me opportunity to speak in the Nepal community. So this session is about my development and best practices. This is a small agenda which I have for today. I would just explain about myself, where I come from, and something about the M365 development and the tools to use. And there are several free programs, developer programs, which are available for anyone to start with. Then you can develop some of the applications, which I can give you some samples, which I deployed in my own SharePoint. This is about myself. My name is Senthamil, and I am an MVP on the Office development, M365 development in general. And I do more SharePoint development and the Teams, Microsoft Teams development API using the Microsoft Graph API. I have my own blog as well, mssgreat.net, and you can follow me on the Twitter. I have my YouTube channel on my own. I do speak more about the SharePoint development or the M365 development, Power Platform, Power Automate, and the Power Flow, and also some of the Microsoft Surface devices. Okay. So for the today's session, M365 development, basically, if you are kind of a university student or kind of an entry-level programmer, whom do you want to start learning about new stuff and get the hands-on, and then you want to join or look for a quality programming skills plus a job opportunity, you need to time look for or upgrade your skills. So some of the skills is that M365 development, which is one of the market most required skills as well, apart from other open source and other development tools. If you consider M365 development, there are several platforms or the tools which you can use to develop for M365. Before I go into the M365 development, I would explain what is M365 first. M365 is kind of a Microsoft license cloud-based ecosystem. It is different from Azure. Azure is different, and M365 is another license-based model. M365 runs on top of Azure, completely on the Azure AD. If you have an account with Azure, then probably the same account you can start using it with M365. The same M365 account or the license which you create, you can log in with your local laptop with that account. Example, if I have a M365 license, basically it's a subscription model. So if I have a M365 license, Microsoft would give you a URL plus the email. So with that account, you can log in with your local laptop as a work account. And remember that your Windows 10 should be minimum of your professional Windows Pro or Windows Enterprise Edition, not the Home Edition. Home Edition might not allow you to log in with the Azure AD or the M365 account. If you have a Pro and the Enterprise, you can log in with your local machine with the work account. They call it as a work account once you have a license with the M365. There are several licensing models for M365. It's a bit of complex licensing model, but the licensing model will give you more products. By default, you will get Outlook, which is the Exchange server, and SharePoint, and few of the other products. Teams also comes along with the M365 subscription. So you can use all these license model to program or to develop some application in the platform. One of the major platform which comes along with M365 is the SharePoint. Most of the enterprise nowadays uses SharePoint as an internal intranet application. So some of the enterprise application, they might want to develop or customize the existing SharePoint intranet. So in that scenario, you can start learning M365 development for SharePoint, and you can customize SharePoint development, SharePoint portal with your skills, and then impress your company with the customized portal. The next opportunity is the SharePoint add-in. Add-in or the Office add-in. Instead of a SharePoint add-in, we can even call it as an Office add-in. Those Office add-in are nothing but, for example, if you have a Microsoft Excel, Word, or a PowerPoint, you can create an add-in which would be installed on the machine and sits as a kind of macro. I would say top-level macro. So that can do some custom action on your Microsoft Word or the Excel. Example would be, take a case of in your organization, you already have a HR policy where you have a HR form to be filled in with some details to be submitted. You can automate that using Office add-in, and those forms can be integrated directly into your Excel or PowerPoint or your Microsoft Word. And when they submit the form or the detail, it can directly go into SharePoint or your database or to your local Excel file even, or to OneDrive. So you can program add in such a way you can get the profile of a person whom they are using the Office or the Word or Excel. When they open the Excel, they can look into the profile detail, and they can pre-fill certain details like the email, department, those kind of thing you can query using REST API and fill in your detail. So that's the kind of a programming you can do in Office add-in. That is more of customizing your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and the Microsoft Outlook. And the next one is about the Teams development, Microsoft Teams development. Nowadays, Teams becomes a default conference or the meeting tool for any of the enterprise, as long as they have the M365 subscription. Whatever the development you do with SharePoint, later I would mention you, it is a SharePoint framework. The same component you can deploy to Microsoft Teams. Imagine a scenario in a Teams, you have multiple tabs. Each tab, you can create a custom component to host inside the tab. And instead, they navigate away from the Teams and go into SharePoint or into your local intranet. You can get all the details or open the information of a company or a person or your full people directory inside Microsoft Teams as a tab. So these tabs can be programmed, and you can customize to use REST API and program based on the REST API and get the details from your local database or from a common data source or from the SharePoint even. So those kind of scenarios, Teams development will be helpful. So to power with all these development, M365 developing utilities, Microsoft Graph API will be the backbone for all these M365 development. Imagine a scenario where you want to get data from Microsoft SharePoint. You can use the Microsoft Graph API and pull the data from SharePoint list. or from a backend from the SharePoint. Similarly, the same Graph API, you can use details from Outlook. Example, like if you're developing a simple website, wherein if someone logs in, you want to show the upcoming calendar event or the upcoming meeting inside a website. You can use the Microsoft Graph, connect it to your Exchange server or your Outlook, and get all the details from the calendar. You can also try to get all the email details as well from Outlook. Also, it connects to the people directory, as I mentioned you before. You can try to get a person, job profile, department. So all the details you can get from Graph API. And based on the people logged in details, you can do some action along it. So that's a kind of base the Microsoft Graph API gives you. There is a separate site available from the Microsoft. We open the site. Okay. So this is the Graph Explorer, which I mentioned you. This is the backbone for all the M365 development. You can query data from most of the platform within the Microsoft. You can always go to developer.microsoft.com/the Graph Explorer. So once you go into the Graph Explorer, you can sign in with your email ID. I already signed in with my Office 365 or the M365 account. So once you sign into your Office 365 account, these are the samples which you can find out. So if you see here, it connects to most of the platform, Excel and the groups, OneDrive, calendar, people. So these lists will keep on increasing in. So for example, if I want to get all the SharePoint sites within my organization, then when I click, so it will return. This is actually the original data from the REST API, which returns in the JSON format. So if you see here, in my Office 365 or the M365, I have only one site, one SharePoint site, and its display name, and it is a root site. So similarly, if I want to get the people's list, then it brings you all the people inside in your organization who you are working with. So the name of the people who are really working with, closely working with the people, it gets the detail from. So everything is a JSON format. This gives you a snippet of what would be the output of Graph API. So based on that output, you can program. So there is a planner. In case if you have a planner, you can do it. If you see here, there is one more, which is a user activities. User activities is again what are the applications you are using, and what is your activities within the machine which you log in. So right now, I don't have any activities which I logged into the machine. So it shows me 401 or it doesn't have anything. I need to enable it. So similarly, there are several platforms which you can program, and everything is a REST API. So based on the REST API, you can query the detail and the URL will be displayed here. See here, graph.microsoft.com version, and me is like whatever the activity you're trying to find out for you, then it would be similarly for the Excel. If you say, let me get some applications, get list of applications. Okay, so every time would be like me relates to your own details, my joined teams. Okay, so me/join teams. So this would be the REST API call. Most of the time it would be get. If you want to update details to, for example, if you want to send an email with some detail, then it would be something like put or post. So based on the information which you pass through the REST API. Most of the time it would take the JSON, and you always need an access token as well. to call any of the Graph API, and everything is a cloud-based. So you just need a M365 subscription. Once you get that subscription, just make sure that this Microsoft Graph API is allowed within your organization. Once it is allowed, then you can just use the URL like this and call your API, and everything would be like a JSON file. I can query more details from the Microsoft Teams. For example, if you're developing a simple tool to manage the Microsoft Teams within your office, then you can easily use the Microsoft Graph API and find out who are all the members within a team and what are the channels which you are using, each channel information. You can even create a channel without even going into Teams. You can just create a website, add a create channel button. Given an information, you can create a channel for a team. And you can even post a message to a particular channel or a chat. So all these are programmable APIs which are available to make your development much easier for teams. So that is about the Graph API, which I want to give you some detail. The next one, which I want to show you, is that. Okay, so next one, what are the tools and the development technologies which you can use for programming M365? So the main tools which you would be using for development would be the Visual Studio Code. So the Visual Studio Code is the primary development tool for SharePoint, which is the SharePoint framework. And Visual Studio 2019 would be SharePoint add-in or the Office add-in. Because Office add-in is more of a client-side programming. It still uses the JavaScript or the VB script or your client-side scripting. But those components are still a COM or a DLL, which has to be installed in your local machine so that those add-in will be shown in your Office 365 or the Word, Excel, PowerPoint component. So those comes with Visual Studio 2019. So when it comes to the language or the framework you want to do, you have to be, you should definitely know the JavaScript. And the recent requirement would be that if you know the TypeScript, then it is an added advantage because there are several frameworks nowadays on top of the TypeScript, which is the React.js, Angular, Vue.js. So there are so many of the frameworks, JavaScript frameworks, which are there, which you should be familiar with. That would help in your programming for M365 development. C# is only for the add-ins, but again, you can still use JavaScript nowadays. So you really don't have to use the C#. So C# is like, it's good to know, but not a mandatory one. And finally, the API, as I mentioned you, Microsoft Graph API is the base REST API model for all, for integrating your programming with all the platform within the Microsoft. So now, once you know how the development is, how do you do the community? How do you involve, or how do you start your M365 development? First, you should be familiar with the community model, community events which are happening around you, which is that SharePoint developer community. There is a separate SharePoint developer community where I've given the URL. You can enter into there. There is a monthly call with the people. You can able to communicate with them. And if you face any issue or want to have some specified information about any of the details on the SharePoint development model, you can always check there. And the main development center is the M365 developer center. This is the site which you should bookmark it, because when you go into the M365 Dev Center, this is the main platform for all the M365 development. And it gives you the full details about what are the development options. Whatever I mentioned, it's almost here. For example, you would see Microsoft Graph, Microsoft Teams, Office, SharePoint, and Windows. So all the development would be in one single umbrella. And whatever the boot camps which we are doing, if you want to know more local events which is happening around for M365 development, you can always go into the boot camps. Like the boot camps which we are doing now, right away, which we are speaking now, it's in this developer.microsoft.com, and here it is. This is the event which you are now I'm speaking. And this event, like this, there are similar events all over the world for Office 365 and M365 platform. So it's worldwide event. And also there are developer certification which are available for M365 platform. You can filter by based on your role. Like if you want to be an architect role or a developer role, M365, there are certain certification which you should get familiar with. Like the M365 Certified Developer Associate is one of the certificate which you can do, which tells you how to develop application for SharePoint or in general about development platform. And similarly for Office 365 development, there are certain certifications which you can look for. And other things which you should really know is about the resources, which I mentioned you, the events and the trainings which are locally happening for M365 development. Okay. And this is the SharePoint developer community, which I mentioned you. If you are more into SharePoint development, this is one of the good way to connect with the Microsoft communities, wherein they would really helpful in addressing your issues, or they would give more in-depth about SharePoint development. So this is one of the key sites which you can bookmark and follow on that. Okay, so that is about the M365 development. So where do you start? For example, if whatever the development tool or the resources which I mentioned in, sometimes those are licensed. M365 subscription is basically the license, which is like either the company can sponsor you to start programming it, but if you are just from the university looking for a job and want to try out M365 development, you really don't have a choice that you cannot pay for the subscription. So in that scenarios, how do you start M365 development? So as I mentioned you have to log into the site, Dev program, and Microsoft has a M365 developer program already, which is completely free. You can subscribe to the M365 developer program. And once you subscribe to the M365 developer program, Microsoft will give you a full access to all the development platform, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, all the development platform like the Power Platform, Power Automate, everything comes free for you. You don't really have to pay even a single cent. So what is that? It comes with that developer program. Microsoft gives you a fully working license of E5. So M365 E5 developer subscription is completely for you. You just have to sign up, and it would just ask for your mobile number for OTP to make sure that it is the real person who is subscribing to it. So once you subscribe to it, you have a fully working the full license. The license contains even your Power Platform, Power API, everything is there. You can even try out that. And what is the account you should be using it? To sign up, you can use a Microsoft Live account. And once you sign up for the live account, then they would give you a work account. As I mentioned you, it asks you to ask for a few questions when you try to subscribe, and it would create a separate subscription for you. The subscription comes with your domain name. Like in my case, it is mssgreat.onmicrosoft.com. So it will always have onmicrosoft.com a URL. So with that email, you can even log in with your local laptop. So once you log in with your local laptop, then it is kind of everything is SSO, which is a single sign-on. When you open a SharePoint, automatically it logs in with the work account. You can even log in your mobile and use your Teams. It comes with a fully licensed E5 Teams, and you can start programming with Teams. Okay, and does it include Azure? No, it does not include Azure, but you can activate Azure with the same account, but you'll have to pay for your Azure subscription. If you already have a Visual Studio subscription, then you can use $150 free Azure subscription. But this M365 will not come with Azure. And whatever the subscription, developer program subscription which you are creating, is valid only for 90 days. Previously, Microsoft was giving for 1 year, but now they cut down it to 90 days. But that 90 days is like if you are really genuine and doing some programming and learning some programming, Microsoft will try to automatically renew for another 3 months. But if you are not very active, you are just created a subscription, never used it, but then those will expire. But again, during the expiry, you can claim with the email ID saying that you really want to renew it. You can claim the renewal, but it is up to the approval process. If you are, to be frank, I've been using this for almost 2 years now, 3 years now. Every 3 months, Microsoft will automatically renew, because I would genuinely use this subscription to create or play around with SharePoint or the Teams API. So they would track that as well. Okay, so finally, I would give some sample of what is the development thing which you can do on SharePoint or with Office 365. Okay, so this is a SharePoint site, typical SharePoint site, which you can see on top. But I have created a custom component and deployed it into as a component here. So if you see here, I have used a jQuery and some Bootstrap component, and that is the one which is used here to develop an application. And I just shown what are the controls to be here and the phantasm and plus the animated icons. Apart from that, there are several applications which you can develop. Like for example, I can create something like a website wherein you can get all the details of the animals and you can show like in a carousel. So those details will be coming in. So this is a simple application wherein these details are in the SharePoint list. So if you know some of the SharePoint, this is a SharePoint list which the organisms are there. So basically this is a SharePoint list with all the details. The same data, this data is shown as in a nicer format of the carousel, which is the carousel. So this is the same list, which is the SharePoint list. So this data is shown in a nicer formatted way, like in the carousel. The same data you can even show it in a animated format. Like I try to get all the organisms. So it's an animated format. So when you mouse over the animals, you will see some animation. And these are the details which are already there in the SharePoint list. So this is the detail. It's like a column table. The same table structure, you just show it in a nicer format. So these kind of applications you can build within SharePoint. So if you know M365 development, you can create these kind of an application and embed it inside the SharePoint. This same component, the animal taxonomy component, you can directly deploy into your Microsoft Teams as well. So the look and feel would be the same, and it can even pull the data from SharePoint. So you don't need to do any other changes. The SPFX just compile and upload it into Microsoft Teams. Then it would start to work. The other one would be the same. You can show it in a different other format with a different animation. It's the same component, it's the same data, but we are showing it in a different ways. You can see here a single data, which is shown in a multiple ways. So this kind of a programming you can do with M365 and deploy it into SharePoint or Microsoft Teams. This is about more of customizing the SharePoint to better fit into your organization. In your organization, most of the time people will get bored up with the same modern SharePoint site. If you want to customize it, this is one of the ways where you can program and then customize your SharePoint within your organization. And the last one, which I want to show, is about search API. I think it should work. Organization-wide search. Okay, so this is again one of the component which you can build. SharePoint has a search on its own, but the way it represents the search will be a bit troublesome. So you can create your own card-like component. This is from the Bootstrap, a card-like component. The same data which is in SharePoint, you get the file detail and the uploaded detail on the SharePoint. Then you can deploy it in the display it in the nicer format as in the SharePoint way. So this is one of the good way to represent in SharePoint. Finally, I want to show one which is the Power Apps, which is not really the M365 development, but you can still communicate with SharePoint using the Power Apps, Microsoft Power Apps. This is a Microsoft Power Apps with the Bootstrap kind of UI. So you just create a Power Apps and then submit the data. The data goes into SharePoint. So those kind of the M365 development you can do with. Let me click this one. So for some reason it is not working. So also I developed one of the component which communicates with the Graph API. Basically this Teams API, for some reason it doesn't work. Basically I created one Teams administration module within the SharePoint. Like imagine a scenario where you want to create 200 channels or 200 teams within your organization. So creating it in the UI is a daunting task. You can't be creating 200 channels. So at that scenario, you can provide an administration tool completely out of Microsoft Graph API, and you can create 100 or 200 teams just by giving you a name with some parameter. Automatically, it will run at the background and it will start to create 100 teams. And if you want to manage the channels within the team, how many of the channels you have, and how many of the chat, who is active, how many of the groups you have, members, you want to add members to the team. So all these administration tasks, if you really want to create an application outside of the teams, wherein you want to just do everything from the SharePoint wise, you can still program using Microsoft Graph API and embed it into the SharePoint. Not just SharePoint, you can embed it into your website even. If you just have a website, just put those components, then it will start to work. So those kind of a programming you can always do with Microsoft Graph API. And the one other way which I want to do is the development tools. So Microsoft Visual Studio tool, Visual Studio Code is one of the development tools for M365. Previously, Visual Studio 2019 was the primary tool for Microsoft platform. But now more and more open source components have been developed. So the Microsoft Visual Studio Code is become a default kind of a component for SharePoint or the M365 development. If you see here, this is one of the SharePoint development platform or the development application which I developed, which I shown you just now on the SharePoint, which is hover animation. So this hover animation, this is the this application whole source code is this one, very simple. So I just have one class which is a TypeScript. So completely a TypeScript. This sample is not using any JavaScript framework, which is the React.js or Angular or Vue.js. It doesn't use anyone. It uses the plain jQuery plus the TypeScript APIs. So basically, this is the key API, which I use to get the details from SharePoint just by concatenating all this. Then finally, I form my own HTML. So this is the HTML which is formed, which looks circular or square. So based on the class. So this is the class which instructs the HTML to have it a square or a circle. You can see the shape. And there are some animations on top of it. Everything is by CSS and the class name. That's it. And it creates this class, this HTML for each animal. And finally, it appends it to the main HTML. That's it. It's a very simple one. So you just read the detail and form your own HTML. So those HTML is finally appended into the main HTML. That's it. So it is a simple, straightforward M365 development for SharePoint. Initially, it looks a bit tedious, but once you start understanding how all the files are wired up, it takes a while to learn. Probably you will need to be master in TypeScript. Then it is easy for you to learn any of the development, M365 development. And you can finally deploy as an app inside your SharePoint. So these are considered as app within the SharePoint. So if you enter into the backend of SharePoint, you can see these are the apps. So these are apps which are deployed into my site collection level. And these apps are the one which I drop into the pages. So the carousel is one, JPages, or the hover animation. So all these are apps developed. And if you are keen on deploying these apps into the marketplace or like an app store, Microsoft has its own Office store. So some of the enterprise might be interested in buying your app if your app does a valid output, like an Nintex. Nintex is one of the powerful workflow. They develop and then publish as an app in the Office store. So anyone who is willing to download it, they can just download and activate in their organization. Then they can use the app. Really, I have seen few people who uses the app and deploy it into the Office store. Then they can download and use it. So that is also one possible way you can deploy it. Okay, so those are the M365 development platform plus the tools which you can use. Finally, about the best practices, Microsoft has already created their own Fluent UI, which is the framework for. Mostly they are following the React. My suggestion would be that if you're doing M365 development, you start with React.js because Microsoft most of the time uses the React and they promote more of a React component rather than Angular or other framework. You can still use those framework, but those components like the controls might not be available. So you would see more controls only for React. Fluent UI is, I would say Fluent UI is similar to your Bootstrap framework for UI. But this Fluent UI is across all the Windows platform. It is not just for, go to Fluent, you would see. It is not just for SharePoint or the web. It is for Windows. It's for iOS development. It's for Android development. iOS and Android development is using Xamarin and the cross-platform as well. So in most of the time, M365 development is mainly the web. So you just go here, then you will see all the iconography plus the typography, which is used within the web. So the Fluent UI icons, you can use the icons, which they have their own format. So in all your application, you can use these icons. Like it's similar to the Font Awesome plus the Bootstrap. So it is up to you. How do you use that? And this Fluent UI, they have already have several controls. If you see here, these are all the React controls. Most of them are React based, and you can directly use it into your application. Like you don't really have to program for file upload, date picker. So most of the predefined controls are already here. The color picker, all those stuff. You don't have to program so much. The hover card. So everything is optimized for M365. So if you are developing something for Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you can just use this Fluent UI and it will automatically inherit the themes from the Fluent UI. So everything is kind of, you would see the themes from here. Can't log into the, let me show you the themes, resources. There are some themes available as well. Okay, theme designer. So this is one of the advantage of the Microsoft Fluent UI. It will automatically inherit your Office themes, like the blue, the orange, whatever that comes with the Office theme. It will automatically inherit. All the controls which you use will by default have those themes inherited. So you don't have to extra do all those colors. So if you see here, most of the controls are already there. Filter control, the top toolbar control. So it's all already there. You can create your own theme, export it, and use it into your application as well. So that makes much easier. So the Fluent UI is one of the best practices you should follow, Fluent UI. And apart from that, whatever the code or the samples which I've shown you, everything is inside in my GitHub. If you go to github.com/mssgreat, you would see several samples. Out of that, SPFX is one of them. So whatever I've shown you, the I hover, the animation, everything, all the source code, everything is there. You can just clone my Git and then just install npm installs. It will install everything for you. So you can follow this GitHub. That's how it is done. Okay. And finally, if you want to set up your SharePoint, there are several steps to follow it. Okay. Just set up your SharePoint development environment. As I mentioned, the preliminary is that you definitely should have minimum of M365 developer subscription. E5 subscription is more than enough. You have so many of the platform which comes along with the E5. Once you create and have the setup ready, then you need to install all the predefined with prerequisites, which is Visual Studio Code and the Gulp, Yeoman. So the steps are pretty much already here. You just follow step by step. Then finally you will be ready to develop your SharePoint application. And pretty much this is the same setup you would require for Teams development as well. If you are doing customizing a team, like you are creating a bot for Microsoft Teams, creating through PVA, which is the Power Virtual Agent, is easy way for creating a bot. But there is pros and cons in using Azure bot or the PVA bot. If you really want to communicate with SharePoint list, customizing and get the data, for example, the same scenarios where PVA scenarios, which the previous session, the speaker was mentioning about the HR policies. The same policies assume that you want to get the details or the HR policies from a SharePoint document library, and you want to get the PDF content and embed it and take a snippet of the PDF component and show it in the bot. Those are all the tedious steps which you cannot do with just PVA or the Azure bot. Those scenarios, you have to use the Microsoft Graph API, connect it to SharePoint, to the document library, get the file, parse the file, and then just get the snippet of the file. So those kind of a complex operation for a bot, you can do through your Graph API, Microsoft Graph API, using your programming. So this programming is more for diving deeper into your bot framework, understanding each level of the questions, plus customizing and getting the details from a several platform. Imagine your organizational data is in the SAP system, your HR detail is in all the documents are in the SharePoint, and your people directory is in a different HR system. So you can create a Microsoft Graph API connecting to all these platforms and show it in the bot, and the bot can do can be more of contextual. So those are very complex things which you want to do by programming. You can still do with Microsoft M365 development. Okay. So that's how the development things works in. You can follow me on the YouTube channel as well. You can subscribe to my channel. I would have several playlists. Like SPFX is one of my favorite topics or the subjects because I've been using in my organization a lot. And the Power Platform, I have few of the videos for Power Platform as well, like hardcore things from the Power Platform, not the usual thing. Usually I don't write simple things in the Power Platform. If you see here Power Automate, how do you manage the objects? How do you filter over data? So those are for complex details which you do from the Power Automate. I would sometime add it as an video here, so you can follow it. So you can see here through the REST Power Automate, Power Automate within a Power Automate. So those kind of a complex scenarios. So those are all the videos which I have already. You can subscribe to it and maybe you make use of it. So that's all from my session. So hopefully it was much helpful to you. Thank you so much for attending my session.
Any questions, guys? Any last minute questions? We're almost towards the end of the event. I see Nabeen in the call, Sumit, Santosh, Marut, I saw Marut somewhere, maybe not. Okay, he's so. Any questions? Any last minute questions? If there's any, then I think this is the right time. Else, let me do a closing note. I think this is it. Yeah, with this, yeah. Thanks a lot, Senthamil, for your insightful session.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone loved it, and hope this presentation because we'll also post this presentation as a recording in our YouTube channel as well for public consumption. So, guys, with this, like I said, we are at the end of the Global Microsoft 365 Bootcamp today. So before we close, on behalf of the entire Nepal Cloud Professionals community, let me have the pleasure of thanking each and every one of you for joining us in the call, in the discussion today and making it engaging and interesting. Also, a special shout out to Microsoft MVP Uday Adhikari from joining all the way from the US, and Senthamil, of course, as a guest speaker from Singapore. Ranganathan from Malaysia, and Vaibhav from my team for making the sessions engaging and interesting. Huge appreciations to all of you, including our speakers, Asis Baral, Darsana Karki, Poonam Pahari. Poonam joined all the way from Canada, and myself. So without you all, this event would not have been interesting today. So I think it really was a good one, as long as I know. So also, let me also thank all the supporting partners, Microsoft MVPs, Dogma Group, Silogic, our media partners, ICT Samachar, Living with ICT, Tech Sathi, Tech Pana, Tech Patro, Naya Samachar. There are a number of news medias that they covered global Microsoft Bootcamp, 365 Bootcamp today. Let's catch up on our upcoming meetup. So with this, I officially announce the end of this bootcamp. Thank you so much once again to each one of you for joining us today. So hopefully we'll meet up in our next upcoming meetups. Yeah. And meanwhile, I'll be here. Along with maybe some of us would be here in the call for about a few minutes. If you want to if you want to like be on a discussion or hang out for any experience sharing or anything, we'll still be here for about 2 to 5 minutes. Yeah. With this, thank you so much all. Bye-bye. Sumit, I see you in the call. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you find it today? I noticed that you have been blogging a lot, which is very good.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been doing it for like some time. Yeah. For today's event, I know from Poonam because I work with her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
So I was wondering, like, how many companies here in Nepal work with Power Platform? I know Dogma Groups and C-Logic is part of Dogma Groups. And in
Yeah.
Leapfrog, we have a small division which works in Power Platform. But I
Okay.
think apart from that, I don't know any companies that do that.
Yeah, I don't think we have. I don't think we have much from Nepal, but I think there are companies which I would say are hidden.
Mm-hmm.
We need to find them
Yeah.
because we need to build a bit of community around Microsoft Dynamics 365 Power Platform, Microsoft 365 development platform. You know, uh, yeah. I don't think we have a good number of organizations working in this platform.
Yeah, but I'm happy to see like too many people joining today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like in the initial days of Power Platform, like it was too difficult to get any solution because you don't have live humans to interact with about these problems. And now even this small community is pretty helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think let's keep the momentum. I think let's catch up sometime later.
Yeah, sure.
And then we can think about what we can do in this area.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anything else, Marudai? I think you're there. Are you there? I thought you were there. Okay, no worries. Maybe he has left already. Nabeen, are you still in the call? All right, then. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Sumit, for joining in. Thank you, others, for joining in. So let's connect later. Yeah. Signing off. Bye bye.
Bye bye.